Welcome back to the City Current Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're always honored to bring you inspiring stories of individuals and organizations making a difference, empowering the good, and we love talking about mental health and wellness. We're honored to be joined by Dr. Justin Dodson, owner and primary therapist of Navigating Courage Counseling and Consultation. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I am so glad to be here with you today, Jeremy, and I look forward to the conversation that we get to have.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about mental health, and you on your end working specifically with men. I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation when you talk about the unique challenges, opportunities, obviously the mental side of this. And so before we dive in deeper, give us a little bit of a background for you personally and how you got into this business.
Yeah. It's so interesting you asked that. I was answering this question recently, and I said, well, I guess it started with a lifestyle of people pleasing. Because even when you talk to therapists across the board, they'll always say, well, I got into this because I wanted to help people. But the reality is, many therapists entered the profession because we were always really good with talking to people and understanding feelings. And so then that became a role that you played in your friend group and in your family and at the holiday time. And so people just know, all right, that one over there can listen, understand, and make me not feel judged. And so that's really how I got into this. I was never really good with numbers. I don't ask me to add or subtract anything. I really wanted to be a lawyer growing up. So I did mock trial and I studied and I did competitions. And then I went to UT Chattanooga. So I'm born and raised here in Memphis. Went to college and I said, I think I want to study psychology. I've been really good with listening and I'm interested in the way the brain works and minored in sociology. And then I went to graduate school because I learned that with a degree in psychology, I'll be working at Express for 30 years. So I decided to get a master's degree. And so that's where I graduated from Lipscomb with a degree in counseling. And then I realized, oh, wait, you have to get a license. So I was just shocked every every step of the way because when are you done? When are you done? So I got the license. That took about 2.5 years to get hours because what people don't know, after you get a master's degree, you really have to have 3,000 hours of supervised work. So even after I've been in school for 3.5 years with a master, well, 3 years, it still took a couple of years after that to work towards the licensure, which really gives you the freedom to practice as an independent clinician, not under someone else's license. So I started as a people pleaser and I ended in purpose, truly because I do what I love and I really believe in mental health awareness. And then I worked for a nonprofit agency here in Memphis for a couple of years after I got my master's. And then I went towards my PhD for some reason, and that took about 4.5 years. So total 11.5 years of school. And here I am.
And the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
So talk about some of the things that you're seeing right now in terms of struggles. So paint the picture because, obviously with the pandemic, a lot around mental health, but in a very, kind of different way in terms of isolation, depression, things like that. And now coming out, you end up, instead of blue skies and sunny, it's kind of like, okay, inflation, recession, job loss. So
yeah,
what are you seeing right now with your clients?
Yeah, honestly, so I work with adult men only. And a common theme that I see across my clientele are symptoms of depression and what we know and anxiety. And the contribution to that can really run the gamut of a lifestyle that doesn't afford someone working out or eating healthy to poor, unhealthy relationships to stress about jobs and racial tensions in the US and COVID concerns. So truly you see this cluster of presenting concerns. But what we do know about depression, it's really just a symptom of several things happening at one time. That could also be chemicals that are not balanced in the body. It could be thyroid issues. It could be some type of disease. And also, we're coming out of wintertime, which a lot of people find seasonal affective disorder, where you are depressed because we have shorter days, not much sun, it's gloomy. So I see a lot of that as well. So I'm going to say presenting concerns, symptoms of depression. We just have to figure out what's contributing to that. Symptoms of anxiety, we have to identify what we're afraid of because all anxiety, I say, is associated with some fear. And so those would be the two main presenting concerns in terms of diagnoses that I work with on a regular basis. But then in addition, I see people in unhealthy relationships, an inability to cope healthily to work stressors, life stressors, having children, having families. And so the reality is that no matter how much money you make, no matter how good you look, how good you smell, how well you dress, everyone is facing something challenging in their life, and we're all really just trying to figure it out. We just have different ways of going about doing that. So the work that I get to do with adult men is to truly collaborate with them to figure out what would work the best for them. Because even though I see presenting concerns that are similar, I cannot respond and work with everybody the same because that's insanity because people need different things based on their upbringing, their backgrounds, their skill level, their emotional intelligence, their ability to collaborate with a therapist.
When you're sitting down with someone and you're unpacking this and trying to figure out kind of where they are, and I love how you're giving us perspective, right? Like around where does anxiety come from? Where does that discomfort come from? What are the things that you're kind of looking for, the questions you like to ask, the things that you're looking for that help you get at the root at where you're going to kind of guide them toward and customize those solutions?
Yeah. Ooh, secrets. So I would say that it depends, but cliche therapist work, we start at the beginning. And we try to really figure out where did this first happen. So if I have anxiety around performance at work, well, then I'm really tracking back to when that first started, even before I got my first job. What is my relationship with performance? Um, was I trying to please anybody? What's the pressure around that? Am I working to provide for a family? Where does my definition of manhood begin? And how am I aligning with that or working against that based on societal pressures, my partner or spouse that may be having a certain expectation of me, my expectation of myself, a bad experience that I had once upon a time. So we're really looking, imagine a timeline. We're really looking at when did this first happen, what was happening at that time, and how I responded, because that is what's going to create this over and over again, this practice and this neural pathway of seeing and performing differently. So that going back to the original question, really looking at where did this come from? And then from there, we're going to take inventory of skills that worked once upon a time and things that have not worked. Many times, people, we use substances, we use unhealthy practices to cope and manage with what we're feeling, opposed to actually addressing the feeling and what would it be like to actually experience this. And so it's okay that we want to help ourselves, but the way we help ourselves is really going to make the difference of how we then respond to the world.
Talk about for men ego, because
Mm.
ego can be something that is positive and helps us persevere and push through and have the confidence to take on new challenges. But ego can also be very destructive. And so, talk about ego and how this plays in.
Yeah, I think right there in the middle of those two perspectives that you give is humility. So ego is definitely not a bad thing, and I think we we demonize words because we don't have a great perspective of them. But ego, like you said, it's great and it also can be destructive. So anybody with an advanced degree, anybody that owns a business, anybody in healthcare, anybody that considers themselves high achieving and performative, successful has ego. We wouldn't get there without it. I wouldn't have 3 degrees if I didn't have some sort of ego. I wanted to quit every other month in my doctoral program because it sucked. It was the best, worst experience of a lifetime. But I also recognized that my ego, along with other practices that I did and the community that I had around me and my faith, it helped me get through. Ego can also be self destructive if I am being selfish, if I am hurting other people around me for the benefit of me, and I am clearing out anything in my way, in my path, because I believe that I am supposed to be on top. So ego can be destructive when we don't have empathy, and we don't have humility, and we're unable and unwilling to help other people. So I think that that's the difference. So we ego is not a bad thing. And I really want us to be able to redirect the way we see diagnoses, the way we see mental health. It's really brain health. Um, because anything that we ingest and put in our bodies, it's either going to age, it's going to speed up the aging process or slow it down. And so we get to decide which way on that spectrum are we going to handle things.
Talk about then community service, volunteerism, serving others. I think
Mhm.
that's a powerful way when you talk about, what it does for your own mental health,
Yeah.
to recharge and to serve. So how does that play a role in mental health?
Yeah, so serving people is really important, but even associated, even I'm sorry, aside from that is living in purpose and doing things to help other people. And so, even from the South, we know from church culture, tithing is really important. Well, then you also get into what else can I do to help and give back to other people? So some people find that in the form of volunteering and mentorship and some type of community service. But it also is about how am I building my team and my community around me? So as great of a therapist as I know I am, I always tell my clients that we can't just be in this together. It's going to take a team to manage what we're doing here. Oftentimes, we know in academia that's called an interdisciplinary team. Or in community mental health, we talk about an interdisciplinary team where you have the therapist and a social worker and a doctor. But even for adult men, where's your gym? Who's your therapist? Do you have a chiropractic doctor because we are getting older? Do you have someone that you go to for massages? Do you have a team that you can talk finances with? Do you have a place to volunteer and provide mentorship to someone else? So all of it really does play a role in the way that we take care of ourselves. So I'm glad that you brought volunteerism because that really just plays a role in the community engagement that we have. So when I'm not in therapy, what else am I doing to take care of myself? Oh, great. I go volunteer Friday night. That gives me something to look forward to. I get to give back and I also get to build community and share relationships with people.
Yeah, and I think to me that's a very important piece of it is feeling like you're connected to the community and building those relationships and friendships. Touch on something that unfortunately is very prevalent right now in society is suicide. And so talk about kind of what you're seeing on that vantage point and how we as a community can be more intentional to really help support so that we can make sure that people know that they're loved and appreciated and aren't going down that path.
Yeah. So I'll take what you said and try to remix that a little bit. So suicide prevention is an area that a lot we don't talk about because it can be cliche. And the reality is suicide is preventable. But the ugly reality is that ultimately, if someone wants to die by suicide, they can. But they do that because they acquire the means to do so. They don't have a great sense of belonging and they don't feel like they can add value to anyone's life. So in some cultures, you see older men where they feel like they can't do anything for the family anymore. They then die by suicide. The reality is that we can take care of ourselves the best we can, and we can check on people when we have the capacity to do so. But I think the where I see people go wrong when managing and responding to people that live with suicidal ideation, a person can live with the thoughts to die by suicide and not act on them. So they can be passive with no plan or intent, and they can go in and out for lack of better words. And so people can live full lives while still living with suicidal ideation and never have any plan or intent. It gets a step up and a little bit riskier when people have the ideation or the thought, and they also have an acquired sense to actually complete suicide. So where I see people go wrong is A, not understanding that, but then B, asking and saying the wrong things when someone is asking for help. Typically, someone that has suicidal ideation will ask for or do something that indicates that they're looking for help and assistance. But if I say to you, Jeremy, I think everybody would be better off without me. And you respond and you say, well, that's selfish, or you really wouldn't do something like that, would you? That really just made me lose hope. And I just no longer see this as a safe space. And so, even if I was looking at you as a safe person to confide in, you just ruined that because you made it about you and made it about what you think, opposed to asking me more questions and staying curious. So, in suicide prevention, we do a really bad job as a community of shutting down what makes us uncomfortable, opposed to leaning in and being inquisitive about what someone is bringing to us.
Yeah, that's great insight. If someone said that, what's a better response? I mean, obviously, like you said, be inquisitive and lean into it. But what's a better response for an example?
Yeah. So I'll give you a few different responses because I may not be a person that has capacity to deal with whatever may come out of your mouth, depending on the question. So we have options. How can I help you today? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Can I go with you to get help? Those are some questions that are supportive, and we get to ask directly the question. So I'm also a QPR trainer where I train people on how to ask the question, are you thinking of killing yourself? A misconception is that by asking someone who has suicidal ideation that direct question, that we're putting a thought in their head, or someone that's struggling, we're putting a thought in their head. And it's not the case at all. It actually makes them more likely to communicate and open up about it, as research tells us, opposed to putting an idea in their head that they never had. So asking someone how you can be supportive, being willing to go with them to seek help, asking them for permission to actually get help with them are all supportive ways. Asking them what else they can live for. So we have to find what that purpose is. Typically, if people have some type of purpose that they're living for, no matter if it's faith, family, their pet, a job, success, achievement, living for something helps us live towards something. And people aren't, in their minds, being irrational when they have suicidal ideation. So we have to stop judging by thinking they're being irrational. It's a rational thought for someone in that position. So we have to understand that in order to remain empathetic.
Yeah, great advice. Give us one more tip that, and obviously this is a very broad, so you can go in whatever direction you want, but one more
Yeah.
tip around mental health, taking care of ourselves better, especially for men. What's something that we can be more intentional with to have better clarity around mental health?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good one. You put me on the spot. I would say number one would be, let's honor our feelings and be honest about them. Many times I see the working class, high achieving adult man who just simply doesn't have a safe space to be human. And so one thing that I would tell men today, and people that have a man in their life, that no matter if it's a brother or a husband or a cousin or a friend, that it's not a feminine thing to feel feelings. You're human. And a lot of men have this misconception that, oh, if I feel sad or if I feel hurt and I feel rejected, then that's a quality that is not aligned with being masculine. And that just simply isn't the truth. We're human before we're anything else. And so I really want people to know that you get to honor your feelings, identify what they are, ask for help when you need it, and continue taking care of yourself, working out, eating well, hydrating our body. All those things are really important. And going to the gym and going to a therapist and communicating your needs. Because when our needs go unmet, that causes inflammation, and then that causes disease and mental health issues.
Yeah. So that carries us into the last question, which is the easiest. Where do we go to reach out and connect with you and learn more?
Yeah, so my website is navigatingcouragecac.com. So people can go on there and book a consultation call, reach out to me for speaking engagements. I also do suicide prevention training, panel discussions, presentations on mental health, and even Black mental health. And then I also do consultations for organizations that are looking to educate themselves and their employees about mental health in the workplace. So my website, navigatingcouragecac.com. I'm also on LinkedIn at Justin K. Dodson, PhD LPC, and Instagram at It's Dr. J. Keith.
Makes it easy. Well, Dr. Justin Dodson, thank you for all you do. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you for coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Jeremy. Thank you.